All right, with every single rep that you do, you're going to create some level of fatigue, and it's important to understand this because that will determine the magnitude of stress that the muscle is under, and that will determine more than anything the return you get on your investment of time and effort. Now, how much fatigue are you going to create with every single repetition? Well, roughly 1 to 4% decrement in momentary strength potential can be expected. What that means is every rep is going to feel 1 to 4% harder. And it's going to vary based on the load you're using and how fatigued you are. Lighter loads are going to have a lower decrement and momentary strength potential, whereas heavier loads are going to have a higher percentage of decrement and momentary strength potential. Now, fatigue acts as an X factor. If the muscle is running low on phosphagen or glycogen, you're going to fatigue faster. If the muscle is entering a state of acidosis, lactate and hydrogen ions will interfere with the nervous system's capacity to recruit it. You're going to fatigue faster. So I'm going to give you a couple examples to help illustrate the point. In the first example, let's say that you wanted to fail on the 5th rep and you're in a non-fatigue state. You might select a load that represents roughly 85% of what you could lift for one. The first rep is going to feel like 85% of what you could lift for one. It's going to create some level of fatigue. The next rep might feel heavier. It might feel 3% heavier. The next one might feel 4% heavier and 4% heavier until the last rep feels no different than a max effort, because in that moment it is a max effort. If you wanted to do a set of 20 and you're in a non-fatigue state, you might select a weight that represents roughly 60% of what you could lift for one. It's significantly lighter than the heavier load in the previous example. The first rep might feel like 60% of what you could lift for one. There's going to be a lower percentage in decrement and momentary strength potential, so the next rep might only feel 1% harder, and the next one 1% harder, and it will go in that fashion until fatigue accumulates, and then the reps start to feel 2% harder, then 3% harder, then 4% harder, and the last rep will feel no different than a max effort. Now, it's important to understand this because it will determine the magnitude of stress that the muscle is under. If you want to build the most amount of muscle possible, you got to recruit and fatigue as many muscle fibers as possible without overworking your capacity to recover. You're going to achieve maximal muscle activation when the reps feel like the weight is anywhere between 80 and 90% of what you could lift for one. You do not need to go to failure to recruit and fatigue as many muscle fibers as possible. In fact, doing so could be counterproductive. You risk overworking your capacity to recover. Training is a subjective experience that only you can experience. So if you pay attention to the signs and signals your body's giving you, you can make the appropriate course correction as you go to promote the response that you're actually there to get when you go to the gym in the first place. It's not about lifting a magic amount of weight or a magic number of reps. It's about paying attention to the signs and signals and the feedback that your body's giving you. And as long as you're lifting weights that feel like 80 to 90% of what you could lift for one, then you're putting yourself in the best position possible to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible. Through volume, you can fatigue them and promote the response that you're there to get, assuming you're going to the gym to build muscle. If you like the information, share it, click the fucking button at the bottom of the screen you're looking at, subscribe to the channel, support me, and I'm gonna keep on bringing it.